I've always been a man of the road, delivering goods to places most folks never even heard of. The open highway, the hum of the engine, and the occasional diner where the food is just greasy enough to keep you going. It's a lifestyle that becomes second nature. But there's something about the quiet, isolated towns that dot the landscape like forgotten memories. They each carry their own strange aura, almost as if the past clings to them, whispering in the wind. One late summer evening, I found myself in need of rest after pushing my rig through South Dakota's endless stretches of road. I'd been driving for what felt like an eternity, and the humidity was suffocating, making the windshield fog up, even with the air conditioning on full blast. That's when I saw the sign abreast 5 miles. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another small town, a place to grab a bite and catch a few hours of sleep before continuing on my way. I should have kept driving. Burge wasn't even on most maps, and when I pulled in, I understood why. It was more of a ghost town than a living one, with maybe 15 buildings in total. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone and strangers stick out like a sore thumb. As I parked my truck near the only gas station, I noticed that even the trees seemed to lean away from the town, as if they knew something I didn't. Hungry and tired, I wandered into the only restaurant in town, a place that had a bar attached. The door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, and the smell of stale beer and old wood hit me like a wave. There were only 3 people inside: the bartender, a burly man with a beard that seemed to swallow his face, a young woman sipping on a bottle of beer with no label, and me, the outsider. Wasn't expecting a warm welcome, and I didn't get one. The bartender gave me a look that was somewhere between curiosity and suspicion. While the woman barely acknowledged my existence, I sat down at the bar, ordered a beer, and tried to make myself as invisible as possible, but she wasn't having it. "I haven't seen you before," she said, her voice a strange mix of soft and gravelly, like a record playing at the wrong speed. "I'm just passing through," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Pulsing through," she repeated, as if testing the words on her tongue. "What brings you to a barrage?" "Just needed a break," I said, taking a sip of my beer. "Been on the road for 11 hours. She chuckled, a sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You must have some stories, being on the road that long." "None worth telling," I lied. The last thing I wanted was to get into a conversation with someone who clearly didn't want me there. But then she leaned in, her eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite place. "We've got a tradition in a barrage," said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Everyone who drinks at the bar has to tell a story. Doesn't have to be true, just has to be good." I hesitated, feeling the weight of her gaze. There was something about this place, something that made my skin crawl, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I figured it was best to play along, so I started talking about the first time I saw the ocean, spinning a yarn that was more fiction than fact. She listened intently, her chin resting on her hands, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she smiled a tight, unnerving smile and said, "You've got a good voice for storytelling, but I've got a story for you too. One that'll stick with you long after you've left a barrage." Before I could protest, she launched into a tale about a creature the locals called the Ghoul. According to her, it was a long, pale figure that haunted anyone who passed through the town, appearing to them in the dead of night, speaking only a single word at a time. The Ghoul, she said, wasn't just a ghost or a demon. It was something far worse, an entity that existed to drive its victims mad, until they either fled or died. I laughed it off, assuming it was just another one of those local legends designed to scare tourists. But the way she told it, with such intensity, made my stomach twist in a way I hadn't felt in years. The bartender, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly spoke up, his voice deep and gravelly. "Better be careful," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "You never know when the Ghoul might decide to pay you a visit." I forced a chuckle, paid my tab, and decided it was time to call it a night. But as I stood to leave, the woman stopped me with a question that froze the blood in my veins. "You can see me, right?" Her words hung in the air like a bad omen. I stared at her, trying to make sense of what she'd just said. Of course I could see her. She was sitting right in front of me, but something in her expression, in the way her eyes seemed to pierce through me, made my heart race. "Yeah, I can see you," I muttered, suddenly eager to leave. "Good," she said, her voice hollow. "Good night." I practically ran out of the bar, the door slamming shut behind me. The street outside was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of gravel under my boots as I made my way back to the motel. The story she'd told kept replaying in my mind, each word echoing louder than the last. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a stupid ghost story, but the feeling of unease clung to me like a shadow. Back at the motel, I locked the door behind me and double-checked the windows. The room was small and musty, a kind of place where the bedspread hadn't been changed in years. I brushed my teeth, trying to ignore the creeping dread that was slowly tightening its grip on my chest. I climbed into bed, but sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside made my heart jump. I felt like I was being watched, but I couldn't pinpoint where the feeling was coming from. Hours passed, and I finally started to drift off when a loud knock jolted me awake. I shot up, heart pounding, and glanced at the clock. 3 a.m. Who the hell was knocking at this hour? I stayed still, hoping they'd go away, but the knocking came again, harder this time, almost desperate. My breath caught my throat as I lay there, listening, my mind racing through all the possibilities. Then, through the thin door, I heard a voice. It was barely a whisper, but it was unmistakable. Open. Your eye froze. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It was something else. Something wrong. It couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The knocking stopped, replaced by the sound of someone or something shuffling just outside the door. Please, open. Gene, the words were soft, almost pleading, but there was a darkness behind them that made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed by fear. I pressed my back against the headboard, my eyes locked on the door, waiting for whatever was out there to break it down, but it never did. The shuffling faded, and for a moment, there was silence. Just as I began to think it was over, I heard a new sound, the bathroom door creaking open. My heart nearly stopped. I knew I'd left it open before I went to bed, but now it was closed. My mind raced with terror as the pounding started again, this time from the bathroom. It was as if whatever was outside had somehow gotten inside. Open. The voice was clearer now, closer. I jumped out of bed, grabbed my phone and keys, and bolted for the door. I didn't care what was out there. I just needed to get out. As I flung the door open and ran outside, I heard heavy footsteps following me, and that same voice, so calm and eerie. No. So I sprinted across the parking lot, the gravel crunching under my feet. As I reached my truck, I could feel something close behind me, almost breathing down my neck. I yanked the door open and threw myself inside and slammed it shut, but before I could start the engine, something hit the driver's side window hard. I turned, and there it was. The face, twisted, grotesque, with eyes as wide as dinner plates and a mouth that hung open in a silent scream. It had no nose, no ears, just those awful, staring eyes. It didn't move, didn't try to get in. It just watched me, and then in that same low, guttural voice, it spoke. See me. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. I jammed the key into the ignition and floored it, tearing out of the parking lot and down the road as fast as I could. But even as I sped away, I could feel it. The weight of its gaze still locked on me. I glanced to the side, and there it was, somehow keeping pace with my truck, its face pressed against the window, smiling. You see me. Jay repeated those words over and over, a macabre chant that filled the cab. I couldn't look away. I tried, but it was impossible. The eyes seemed to grow larger, filling my entire vision until I could see nothing else. Panic set in, and I swerved off the road, slamming on the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop, the engine sputtering. When I looked back, it was gone. There was no sign of anything. No face, no voice, just the dark, empty road stretching out before me. I don't know how long I sat there, too scared to move, too shaken to drive. Eventually, I started the truck again, my hands trembling on the wheel, and drove away from that town, from a barrage, and never looked back. But the story doesn't end there. Even now, when I'm on the road at night, I sometimes catch a glimpse of something in the rearview mirror, a pale face, just for a split second, before it vanishes. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I think I hear that voice again, whispering from the darkness, see me. And every time, I wonder if I ever really left that town at all. Yeah, if these chilling tales kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories. Your support helps keep the horror alive. See you in the next nightmare.